Okay, let's first of all look at our picture. This is kind of cool. I think I'm going to pass this around, even though it's going to take us a little bit of time. Here, I have written down a description. Okay, so this is a illustration of the Divine Comedy on a cathedral wall in Florence, you know, Dante's hometown that banished him, and from 1465, so just slightly over 100 years after he died. And I'll put it here. So it's got the whole Divine Comedy. You have hell, all these poor creatures. You have Mount Purgatory, and then you have it kind of looks like Florence. It's Florence/heaven, maybe in Dante's mind, a little bit. They overlap there. But what's interesting to me is this is just slightly over 100 years after he died. So, what's an author? Slightly 100 years after he died. So, I think of a great author who died around the year 1900. It's kind of a wasteland that I don't. Jane Austen would be too old. H.G. Wells lived into the 30s, and so he's lived too long. Anyway, you get the picture. We tend to think of monuments to great authors or poets as they were hundreds of years ago and they're renowned. He wasn't gone that long before they were decorating illustrations, decorating churches with illustrations from his amazing book. It shows you how it was received at the time. People, not often do people receive a piece of literature and they instantly know this is going to be a classic. This is amazing. They say it all the time. You read the book jackets of covers or the book reviews, destined to be a classic. No, it's not. No, it's not. Most of the time, it's just going to be in a trash heap somewhere. You know what I mean? There aren't very many books that are going to stick around. And rarely does a book get hailed as, oh my goodness, this is a masterpiece during the time. So by not long after Dante's death, there was another author, Boccaccio, an Italian author, and a university in Italy formed a, it says European colleges have a chair of something. That means you're the professor in charge of a particular subject. So C.S. Lewis was the chair at Cambridge. He finally got hired as the chair of medieval and Renaissance literature. He's the head of the department. Boccaccio got hired as the chair of Dante studies. But Dante had not been dead very long. So it's like today, if there were a chair of Tolkien studies. Do you know what I mean? Like a pretty recent, or a chair of C.S. Lewis literature and research. It wasn't gone that long. So this is amazing to me that the people at the time realized they had something amazing. Dante appears to have known he was writing something amazing, I think. We talked last week, I think, about that, where he says, oh, I've got to tone down my genius, because that was a couple weeks ago, because I could be an evil counselor too, because I'm so good with words. And he calls out to the muses, but he talks also about his high art. In today's reading, no, I'm reading ahead of you guys, so I think it was what I read this week. At one point, he says, it is in the Paradise, he says, if I am able to write what I'm aiming to write here, I hope Florence calls me back and they crown me with the laurel crown of the poet, like a poet laureate, in my home. I want to go back to my home. He apparently thought he was writing something that was potentially worthy of, they're going to love it. They're going to call me back. They did not. I'm sorry to tell you, but it also had something to do with the fact that he died. It's hard to call somebody back when they're. Although I did tell you they fought about burying him there. They wanted his body, which was just adding insult to injury, as they say. We don't want you when you're alive, but oh, we'll take the tourist money of people that want to come visit your grave. No, you don't get it. Okay, let's take a look at the end of purgatory. I want to take a little bit of time at the end of class to introduce the paradise. You kind of have to know a little bit about the medieval solar system and universe and how that works for it to make sense to you. So I'm going to try to leave us at least 10 or 15 minutes at the end. So most of what you read this week, the beginning cantos, is pretty self-explanatory. He goes through the ledge of gluttony, and the gluttons are all sort of, they look like they're starving, you know, they're all sunken in, and there's this tree that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, branches out at the bottom. It's kind of like an upside down tree anyway, but you can't reach the branches, and they're starving and they can smell the tree, which sounds very much like Tantalus, you know, in Hades. So that's self-explanatory, right? They were gluttons in life, and now they're tormented with hunger and thirst. The lustful burn in a fire, right? Because their emotions just set them on fire in life. But they're actually the first ones I want to look at. At the end of the ledge of the lustful, before you can head on up to the top of the mountain, do you remember there's something you have to do? There's something you have to go through. Do you remember what it was? And apparently everybody has to go through. What is it, Miriam? There's a wall of fire. And Dante says, let me find this. Blessed ones, this is an angel speaking, all right? Till by flame purified, no soul may pass this point. Enter the fire and heed the singing from the other side. Listen to that for a moment. Enter the fire and heed the singing on the other side. Why heed the singing on the other side? You're going to walk through a wall of fire. How is listening to what's on the other side going to help you? Gives you something to go towards. It changes your focus, and it gives you a goal, doesn't it? It reminds me of that Jesus, in Scripture, it says Jesus, for the glory set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame. He knew the end of the story. It was a horrible story that he had to go through for us. But he did know the end. And that being set in front of his eyes made it bearable. And this is likewise for us, right? We know the end of the story, more or less, and we know the destination, and it makes things more bearable. So presumably, listening to the voices on the other side is going to help. We hear later that on the other side, venite benedicti patris mei, come, you blessed of my Father. You know, and enter the gates of paradise. That's what he's hearing on the other side. All right, this is great. But here's what Dante says. These were his words to us when we had come near as we could, and hearing them, I froze, as motionless as one laid in his tomb. I lean forward over my clasped hands and stare into the fire, thinking of human bodies I once saw burned, and once more see them there. Is Dante just a spirit? He's got a body that can actually be burned. And they're telling him to walk through the fire. Question, when do you think Dante might have seen a body burned? Wait, he did see, but he didn't see bodies in hell. I mean, cremation, the church always frowned on cremation because it's not very honorable to the body. Yeah. What What sometimes happened in medieval times if you were found guilty of something? Likely as not, Dante actually witnessed somebody being set on fire. I mean, it wasn't secretly done. You know, it was in the public square. It was not like executions are today, you know? It's quite possible he knew exactly what it looks like, smells like, sounds like for somebody to be set on fire. I mean, I don't, and I don't want to walk into the wall of fire. You know what I mean? But he did. And so my kindly escorts, which would be Virgil and Statius, the poet that is with him, heard me catch my breath and turned. And Virgil said, within that flame, there may be torment, but there is no death. Think well, my son, what dark ways we have trod. I guided you unharmed on Geryon. Shall I do less now we are nearer God? Believe this past all doubt. Were you to stay within that womb of fire 1,000 years, it would not burn a single hair away. And if you still doubt my sincerity, but reach the hem of your robe into the flame, your hands and eyes will be your guarantee. My son, turn here with your whole assurance. Put by your fears and enter to your peace. And I stood fixed, at war with my own conscience. And still seeing me stubborn, rooted fast, he said, a little troubled, think, my son, you shall see Beatrice when this wall is past. All right. It won't hurt you. That didn't work. Think of all the stuff that we've done. You know, think of all how I've kept you safe. I will keep you safe. This didn't work. You will see Beatrice. That'll work. That'll work. Now, you guys told me that on the ledge of the lustful, they burn in flame. Dante's going to have to go through the flame. He walked like this with the proud. His eyes stung with the wrathful smoke. He's got to walk through the fire. Does Dante maybe have a problem with this one too? What drove him at the beginning? He's in love with this little girl, Beatrice, right? And he went off the rails. He forgot what she was supposed to be to him. She wasn't supposed to be just a little girl or a woman. She was supposed to be God's love reaching out to him. Interestingly, though, the angel said everybody has to go through the fire. Nobody gets through without the fire. Nobody gets through unscathed. In other words, you're almost perfect. You're practically perfect in every way, like Mary Poppins, right? And you just zip up the terraces, right? You don't have to do anything. Everybody's got something. You're going to go through the fire. You're going to through the fire. And interestingly, Virgil doesn't say it won't hurt. He says it won't kill you. Like, won't hurt is a different thing altogether. He didn't say it will be pleasant. It will not kill you. Everybody's got something, you know, and so, but Dante, maybe lust, maybe pride and wrath and lust were his participatory, purgations in purgatory. He does make it through, though, because Beatrice, obviously, on the other side. And they get through, and there's, well, let's skip up to the next canto. What's there on the other side of the flame? What do they walk out into? A forest. Yeah, a forest with a river. At the beginning of 28, it says, eager now to explore in and about the luxuriant holy forest evergreen that softened the new light, I started out. All right. I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning of the Inferno. Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. At the beginning, he's in a forest. It's a bad place, though. There's wolves and leopards and lions, and it's not a place he wants to be. He's come to another forest. And what is this place? Did you understand? There's something growing there. A particular tree. What is the tree that's growing there? Like there's all sorts of weird stuff happens, and this chariot comes and they hitch it to the tree, and it's the Garden of Eden. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We find out, and it looks just like the tree, a little bit of which is growing on the glutton ledge. That is also the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's paradise. It's the Garden of Eden, is at the top. He made it through to the place, and this is kind of sad, where everybody would have started from if Adam and Eve hadn't sinned. All of this wouldn't have been necessary. We all would have started from there. Now, let me ask you this, though. I said we would have started from there. This is now a theological question, okay? If Adam and Eve hadn't sinned, A, do we think they always would have remained exactly the same as they were? B, is it possible that, no, I'm not going to do A. I'm going to do B like that. Does God know what evil is? Does God have a knowledge of, yes. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, does God need that? Does he need to learn good and evil? No, he doesn't. Because he knows what evil looks like. Before, we don't know the timetable of Satan's fall. You know what I mean? But presumably it was very soon after creation. People, speculate on this, but we don't have for sure information on this. But presumably, there may have been an evil force in the universe. Well, I say before God made. There was no before, but you know what I mean. Like he's making the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but there's already evil. Would Adam and Eve ever have known what evil was like God knows it? Like God knows it. Does God do evil? Does God know what evil is? He has that knowledge, right? It's not the tree that makes you evil. It's the tree that gives you knowledge. Do you see kind of where I'm going with this? Would Adam and Eve have always been the same, like the same level of knowledge? Okay, let's put it this way. Would Adam and Eve have learned the name, well, they give the names to the plants. Would they have learned how to care for the plants in the garden? Like would they have maybe learned how to graft one plant onto another plant and create like a hybrid fruit? Why not? Especially if they didn't ever die, you know what I mean? And they had like thousands of years to experiment. How awesome would that be to have like a 1,000-year experiment going that you never have to leave? Dominic, go for it.
Perhaps the tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil is part of like God saying like he's giving us a chance to have free will. Like he's free if we want to be behind him if we wanted to. But of course that'd be going against which would make him upset.
I'm throwing this out here, and this is why. Definitely what Dominic said is true. The rule was don't eat it. They didn't follow the rule. The rule was not, you will never be ready. And that's a scary thing for me to say, but remember, it's not the tree that makes you evil. The evil was the disobeying. They weren't ready. It's like a few good men. You can't handle the truth. You can't handle knowledge of good and evil yet. You just were created yesterday, for crying out loud. You don't understand any of this. You're going to have to grow in knowledge of me and knowledge of the world. And then, because just like God knows what evil is, but he doesn't do it, it's quite possible that, they could have been informed. There's this person, Satan, you know what I mean? And this is what he does. And this is evil if they hadn't fallen for him. Do you know what I mean? You could know it from outside. We know things from inside sometimes, and we know things from outside. God knows it from outside, because he's not evil. Maybe Adam and Eve could have known it from outside. They could have made judgments. They could have matured and grown. They weren't ready. And they showed they weren't ready by not obeying the single command that they were given, for crying out loud. Just a second, Lauren had something first.
Something I was going to say is that we're like capable of sinning. God isn't capable of sinning. He can't at all.
So he looks at all of our sin and he's not tempted by it. Do you know what I mean? But if we saw somebody doing something and it was very attractive to us, we might be tempted. God can't be tempted to sin, but he sees all this malarkey that goes on in the world. He's this long litany of horrors that we perpetrate as human beings, but he isn't attracted to it. He can handle it, right? He can say, I'm looking at that and that is evil. There's a judgment, that is wickedness. That is outside of my will. It's quite possible maybe someday Adam and Eve would have been able to do that. This is the place, in other words, that's what I meant, we would have started out from. We would have started out from. Yeah.
I'd say that sin is a perversion of love. That's why God doesn't need, because he knows what he is love. So, he doesn't need to change it for what it is, because it is already perfect.
Yeah.
And also, what I was going to previously say
Yeah.
was, it's like we're like Adam and Eve, like children, and like a jar of cookies. The parents said, no, will not eat it.
Mhm.
Ate it.
Yeah. Whereas there is a proper time to eat cookies. You know what I mean? So I don't want anybody to be confused. I don't want you to say, Mrs. Ferguson says, like evil is okay. No, I didn't say that. I said there's two ways to know something. Adam and Eve took that fruit and they knew instantly from inside because they just did an evil thing, disobeyed. But it's quite possible that they would have learned things and understood more and more about who they are as creatures and who God is as their creator and what this world is they've been given. We don't have a chance to know what they would have done because they botched it. And you found out that, oh, no, you didn't. I found out. You're going to meet Adam in paradise. So I won't blow that up by, it's the bad thing about reading several weeks ahead. Okay, so he started in a wood. He's back in a wood, but he's been a long way to get there. He's back in the place where everything is perfect. And as he went through the fire, this is at the end of the previous canto to the one we were on. When we had climbed the stairway to the rise of the topmost step, there with a father's love, Virgil turned and fixed me with his eyes. My son, he said, you now have seen the torment of the temporal and the eternal fires. Do you know what is temporal? What's a temporary? Okay. Where are the temporary fires? And the eternal fire, where would that be? That'd be hell. Here now is the limit of my discernment. Virgil says, I don't know anything that happens after this. Why not? Because he's human reason. I mean, two reasons. Because he's a pagan. He doesn't get to go into paradise itself, right? In the story. And also human reason. Like Dante's about to see things that human reason can't handle. And Virgil says, yeah, he doesn't even know what happens in paradise. He doesn't even know what's going to happen in the rest of the purgatory. It's like, okay, we're in totally foreign territory to me. I don't know what happens now. Yeah, Addison.
Why is he allowed to go into purgatory?
Do not know, because it makes a really good story. But also because human reason can lead us to a certain extent to order our loves correctly. We can't do it alone without grace. This is why Virgil can't do it unless Beatrice comes and helps, and calls him. But I think it was you guys I talked to about this. I said this to you guys. So, if you're trying to stop, and mine was, gluttony, it was like, I'm not going to eat this garbage because it's bad for me, reminding me with human reason, you're going to go get blood work done and your cholesterol is going to be up and your blood sugar is going to be higher and you have diabetic family on both sides. This is human reason, right? But still, it can get overridden when I drive past, Whitey's or whatever, and then my reason's like, what? No, I don't remember any of those reasons. I'm going to stop and get something good to eat. And so reason can't do it alone, but reason can come with me to purge sin. But reason just doesn't understand like the heavenly realms. So Virgil said, I've come as far as I can. I have led you here by grace of mind and art. Now let your own good pleasure be your guide. Dante, do whatever you want now. You've been purified of sin. But this does not mean that when he gets back to earth, he can do whatever he wants. in the story, in this realm, he's been purified. You are past the steep ways, past the narrow part. See there the sun that shines upon your brow, the sweet new grass, the flowers, the fruited vines which spring up without need of seed or plow. Until those eyes come gladdened, which in pain moved me to come to you and lead your way. Whose eyes came to him and said, please go to Dante? Not just eyes, but it was a whole person came to him. Beatrice, until you see her eyes, until those eyes come, gladdened which in pain moved me to come to you and lead your way, sit there at ease or wander through the plain. Expect no more of me in word or deed. Here your will is upright, free, and whole, and you would be in error not to heed whatever your own impulse prompts you to. Lord of yourself, I crown and mitre you. Who gets a crown? Who gets a mitre? A bishop. Bishop. It's the staff, right?
No,
That's
that's the hat.
the hat. The mitre. Oh, crozier's. It was one or the other. I'm like, which one is which? I don't use those words very often in my normal existence. I have crowned you king over yourself. You are Lord over yourself. You are bishop over your soul. Dante, you have come to the place where you can't want to do anything wrong. We talked about that before in here, didn't we? That existence where presumably it is eternal existence. We can't want anything wrong anymore. Everything we want to do is good. It's amazing. Yes, Dominic.
I feel like that's kind of weird, right? A better way to phrase, you don't have a reason to do anything wrong. You don't have to smoke in front of your eyes to sin.
This is true. But sometimes we want things, Dominic, and I might want two things that are both good. So I'm trying to decide whether or not to visit someone sick in the hospital or go serve dinner at the, at some soup kitchen. Okay, so I'm using other criteria than it's wrong. Do you know what I mean to choose? There might be how sick is the person, in the hospital? Can I do both? Do you know what I mean? But neither of those wants would be wrong. So I think maybe he's in a place where he might have multiple wants. Do you know what I mean? But as you said, none of them are capable of leading him astray. It would be like that sort of choice. Like, what shall I mean, we don't know honestly, we don't know what heaven is like. Do you know what I mean? But presumably there's activity in heaven, like all activities would be equally good to us. I'm going to make this very like earthly paradise sort of picture, but do I want to sit here in the grass and visit with this other one of the saints, or do I want to go take a walk with that one? Doesn't matter. Go do whatever. We only feel this sometimes, like my soup kitchen hospital scenario. I don't often have multiple choices, and I think they're all equally good, if you know what I mean. Usually I want to do something that's not good, and then I have to assess it. Like, is that a good idea? Should I do that? But it would be lovely if all the things I kind of wanted to do were all equally good. I feel that way about learning things, like as long as it's not a wicked thing, like I'm not studying the occult or something. It's not better to learn geometry than it is to learn literature. It's just, oh, God gave you a mind. Go for it. Learn whatever. Anyway, that's where Dante is now. And Virgil says, I crown you king of yourself and your will. I mitre you bishop of your soul. There's paradise. Go for it. Wander around, do whatever you want until Beatrice comes. And this is the last thing Virgil ever says to him. Don't think I wrote it down. I wrote down his last words, but I didn't. The moment that he looks and Virgil is gone. We'll hit it here in a little bit. Virgil's been with him for a long way. But he's gone past the place where reason can take him. Okay, so somebody said he's at a place with a forest and a river. What's the deal with the river? Lethe. It's called Lethe. Lethe. Do you know, I don't think any other languages have a silent E. It's sort of an English thing, the weird E that we stick on the end of things that changes the vowel quality, but doesn't. Greek and Latin, and they pronounce every letter. Lethe. What does Lethe do?
Doesn't it like clear your guilt of all your sins?
Washes away the memory of your sin. Washes away the memory of your sin. Where does it go? Where does this river go? Just go around in a circle. See, you're like, I know she must be thinking of something. I know there's an answer to this question, or she wouldn't ask it. All right, I'm going back to Inferno. This is the last canto of Inferno, and they climb down Satan, and then they turn over and they climb up Satan, on the other side. And it says, down there, beginning at the further bound of Beelzebub's dim tomb, there is a space not known by sight, but only by the sound of a little stream. Descending through the hollow it has eroded from the massive stone, it's in its endlessly entwining, lazy flow. They follow the stream up at the beginning of Purgatory. Through this cavern. It is Lethe. The memory of your sins, I love this. The memory of your sins flows down to the base of the mountain and down through that pit, and it ends up frozen in the base of hell. That gives me goosebumps. It's so perfect. The memory of your sins is just part of the gross out nature of hell. Do you know what I mean? With all those people frozen in it and Satan frozen in it endlessly. It's gone. It's gone. There is another river we met, Unui. Good mind is what it means in Greek, that brings yourself back, but you don't remember any stain. So if I forgot every sin I ever committed, like big chunks of my life would just be gone. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Do you know what I mean? And then I wouldn't be myself anymore because big chunks of me would be missing. So Unui brings it back, but in a third person sort of, yes, I remember when I was the kind of person that would do that sort of thing. I'm so glad I am not the kind of person that would do that sort of thing anymore. Isn't it lovely that God saved me from being that sort of person? Do you know what I mean? Like you're looking at a stranger. That's what Unui does for you. Lethe carries the memory of your sin to hell. And you don't have to bear it forever. Okay. Let's get up to this really, really weird with the cart and the griffin and the eagle and it just gets a little odd. Do we all agree that it gets a little odd?
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like it does. First of all, we know all through Inferno and Purgatory, he's been meeting people. And they've been legitimate historical people, right? And they've told their stories, and they're also representative of a certain type of sin, perhaps, but they're actually people. But he sees this pageant, and for example, he sees these elders come. One of them, the four gospel writers, but then at the end of the pageant, he sees John as the author of the letters, and then he sees John as the author of Revelation. He like 3 times. How can one guy be there 3 times? It's because it's sort of like a play that he sees. In the Middle Ages, they like to do something. They like to have traveling plays. Years ago, Davenport Junior Theater had a travel wagon. Do they still have the travel wagon? My daughter did the travel wagon, went to parks in the summer sometimes and did plays. And And so, you just set up the Dreams Theater would drive their wagon to a park or whatever, and they'd advertise it and go to Children's Museum or whatever, and they just unload their stuff. They do it right out on the street or in the middle of the park or whatever, and then pack everything up. And in the Middle Ages, they had plays like this, traveling plays, and they called them mystery plays because they were about the sacred mysteries. Okay, they were about God and theology usually, and they had characters, like his name was Greed, or his name was, I don't know, Pride or whatever. And they were dressed up in various ways, and they weren't people. They were characters. They were virtues or vices. That's what I mean, like elements of your character. And they would kind of show you the gospel through these symbolic plays, these mystery plays. This is one of those. So medieval people would read this, they call it the pageant here, and say, oh yeah, it's one of those things, where the wagon comes and they unload the, but we read it and we think, what is going on here? So another thing that it still does happen to some extent. They have processions, religious processions. And so the Catholic world is very familiar with, having, on a saint's feast day or relics or something like that, processing through the streets. All right. So let me read this. The pageant was very much like the Corpus Christi procession. Corpus Christi means the body of Christ. All right. And Pope Urban IV in 1264, 36 years before the Divine Comedy is set, authorized a Corpus Christi procession, reauthorized by Clement V 45 years later. In this pageant, because Corpus Christi, body of Christ, the main event is the host, right? It's a procession of the host, of the communion host. So one would expect to see, like the priests and the bishop and everybody and, singers and everything. It's like a parade, and they're parading with the communion host. This is like one of those, only it's just very odd. And I'm not going to, the editor, the translator did a wonderful job of telling you, what things are. We have, like I said, the gospel writers, we have the patriarchs, we have the 4 girls dancing, the theological virtues, and the 3 girls, or the cardinal virtues, the 3 girls dancing, the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. And dragging the wagon is a griffin. What is a griffin?
It's like a mythical creature that kind of has like parts of a bird and like a lion.
It's lion and bird hybrid. There is a controversy in my household on whether they have ears. I don't even know what to say about that. My daughters still get together and argue about if a portrayal of a griffin should have ears. Because the eagle part, yes, but then sometimes there's like little tufts of feathers that look earish. And my daughter wrote a fantasy novel when she was 13 called The Griffin of Arrestir, which she still hopes to redo and get published someday. Anyway, and then so my other daughter, who's quite the artist, wanted to do illustrations. She's like, I can illustrate your Griffin of Arrestir. Well, draw me a griffin, and she did. Your griffin has ears. She's like, well, they don't. And so this has gone on for 20 years now. Like, you're not allowed to illustrate my story if you are going to put ears on my griffin. That's the end of that story. Griffins have 2 parts. Do you remember who the griffin is supposed to be in this pageant? Christ. Christ specifically. Why? Why a griffin? Why Christ and a griffin? 2 parts. He's divine, he is human. 2 parts. Here's how he is described. Higher than sight, its wingtips soared away. Its bird-like parts were gold, and white the rest with blood-red markings. Okay, its bird-like parts are gold. If we had to pick whether the divine or human was the bird-like part, which were you going to go for? What's a bird more like, the divine or the human? Okay, are we all, am I hearing divine? Why? Yeah, because they fly. It's so not human. It's weird when human beings fly. It's scary sometimes. Although your brother, I'm sure, flies very well, but still. Uh, so gold, divine, heavenly. The rest would be the human part. White with blood red markings. Suffering. Is there something else that's white and red? It's not the same thing that's white and red. I'm asking this very poorly. It's like, yes, there are many things, Mrs. Ferguson. Barbershop poles. There are many things that are white and red. Okay, no. Something that you see on Sundays that is white and red. Yeah, the communion host and the wine. Or the bread and the grape juice, or whatever your church does, okay? But anyway, it's always the same, right? It's something that's very red or purpley, right? If it's not wine, and it's something that's white, like bread. He's the communion host. But I mean, all those other things you said are true. Do you know what I mean? The suffering, it's all in there. Dante's not an either or. We don't have to pick. What did Dante mean specifically by this? He doesn't even know. You know what I mean? He's just throwing it all in there. All the symbols are in there for us to run with. He says, Rome never saw such a comparison. A comparison is like a duded out cart, a really nice carriage, upscale, like the Ferrari of carriages. Is Ferrari the best thing I can choose? Is there something better than that? Lamborghini, okay. Rome never saw such a comparison. No, not for Africanus, nor yet Augustus, two famous Roman leaders who had triumphs. The sun's own would seem shabby by comparison. Did you know the sun has a chariot? Are we familiar with this story? Once upon a time, the sun, sometimes it's Apollo, but usually Helios in this respect, his son named Phaethon said to his mom, is Helios really my dad? She's like, well, let's go ask him. So he said, are you really my dad? Yes, I am. Prove it. Well, what do you want? I'll do anything you want. I want to drive your chariot. Buddy, you don't want to do that. Yes, I do. And you probably remember the story. You're supposed to fly in the middle. Don't go too high. Don't fly too low because you'll scorch the earth. What happens if you go too high? You freeze. And so you got a middle course, but the horses are really crazy. Phaethon crashes, and well, they lightning him out of the sky to save the world. But anyway, it doesn't end well for him. So he says Rome never saw such a chariot. Like the earthly powers. The sun never had such a chariot. What has the sun been through all of purgatory? Like Virgil always goes towards the sun, and he always comments on the sun shining on your face. It's what? It's light. And who is the light of the world? God, Jesus. So he's saying, earthly powers never had such a carriage. Heavenly powers never had such a carriage as this carriage. But we have beside the right wheel 3 maidens. Every time we hear 3, we're thinking faith, hope, and love. The first one was so red she would barely be visible in fire. The second looked as if both flesh and bone were made of flawless emerald. The third seemed a new snow, no slightest wind has blown. And the white one led the dance. Now the white one led the dance, now the red. And from the song, the red one sang, and the others took their measure fast or slow. All right, we're going to do not a test. It's like a psychological poll. If you have red, green, and white, which one do you feel would be love? Which one would be, okay, this is a little harder. Which one would be, this would go either way. Hope? All right. Mark's kind of on the fence. Faith. We have red, white, and green. So everybody's good with the red being the love, because like it's burning ardor, you're on fire with love. So green and white are either faith or hope. Could swing either way, couldn't it? They have that faith is the green and white is the hope. I know Miriam doesn't like that. But
Liturgically, hope is green, actually.
hope is green. So, well, see, and here's the thing. I feel like hope is something that grows. It's a living thing. And faith is pure. So I wrote down next to it what the supposed code is from our translator's notes. Newsflash. So I look at several other books' notes, and this guy doesn't always agree. They don't all agree. Here's the thing: we don't totally know, but later in paradise, he's gonna be quizzed. Yeah, there's tests in heaven, apparently. Dante's gonna be quizzed on faith, hope, and love by like Peter and John and James. It's very scary. And there's a connection, a color connection there. So anyway, here's why I went to the whole trouble to read that. Here is an excerpt from Pope Urban's bill supporting the Corpus Christi procession. Pope Urban would have been the one he's the first one in 1264. Let faith sing psalms, let hope dance, let charity exult. And the three of them are singing and dancing and exulting. It's straight out of the Corpus Christi message. Very interesting. They're led by somebody with three eyes. Our editor says prudence, wisdom, that sees all things, has an extra eye. Are we good with that? Should wisdom lead our, I don't know, does faith, hope, and love lead our wisdom, or does wisdom lead our faith, hope, and love? I will leave you to think about that. It would be. Or do we have faith and hope and love, or we become more wise? Maybe it's a circle. Now, in a Corpus Christi procession, the cart comes, the whatever, it's a cart, the litter, you know what I mean, the thing that you would carry that has on it. What do we see? What are we processing with, did I say, in the Corpus Christi procession? With the body of Christ, the host. The cart comes, and at this point, you're expecting, and they take away the veil, and it is the communion host. Who comes out of the cart? Do you remember? Beatrice. Now, some people are like, whoa, Dante is big heretic. That's blasphemy. But Beatrice is the equivalent of, the body and blood of Christ. But you have to remember something. I mean, it's quite obvious that Dante is coming to understand what Beatrice was for him. Not just a woman. She was a flash of God to him. And if we get those flashes of God and we use them as flashes of God, we're good. If we get those flashes of God and we use them like they're special in and of themselves, and we idolize them, that's a problem. But he even forgot about her. Do you know what I mean? She died, and he says, and I chased after other stuff. I chased after philosophy. I didn't even remember her as a woman. I mean, he didn't forget her, obviously, but he didn't remain, oh, I will be devoted to her memory always. He's just like, well, she's gone. In this procession, she's the host, because she's God reaching out to him. She was God reaching out to him. C.S. Lewis wrote a really weird book. Wrote many books. This one's particularly weird. It's called The Pilgrim's Regress instead of Pilgrim's Progress. And I reread this book this summer, and it's kind of his autobiography a little bit, but it's like Pilgrim's. If you've read Pilgrim's Progress, we're going to read Pilgrim's Progress. Those of you who do next year's class, Pilgrim's Progress is on the list. But he sees an island, the character, John, in this book, sees an island and it just seizes his heart, and he spends all his time, I want to get to the island, I want to get back to the island, I want to see the island. And he spends the whole rest of the book chasing the island and quizzing people on where the island is. And he goes to various places that are all named for, modern philosophical movements and theology and stuff like that. But he can't find the island. And he's forgotten that the island wasn't the destination. The feeling that he got was God reaching out to him. Does that make sense? I tell you this because perhaps one of you has a moment or a thing, maybe not a human being. Sometimes we just get little whiffs of it, as we would say. You're just out and it's a landscape or it's a moment in a song or whatever. It's just, you just exult in it and you don't know why. But if you fixate on that thing, have you ever noticed that if something is really fun, but you try to do it over and over again, just that thing, it stops being so much fun? We get tired of it. There's only so much of a good food that you can eat, and then it kind of starts disgusting you. Or Dante spent part of his life fixating on Beatrice as the perfect woman. He spent part of his life saying, well, she's dead. I guess that's done. And I'm going to forget about that experience. I'm going to try to push that experience out of my mind. Neither of those was a good option. Because when God calls to you through something, he's saying, here I am. But I am not this thing. This thing that's giving you joy. C.S. Lewis referred to it as the joy, that we get stabs of joy. I'm not that thing. So I don't think he was trying to be blasphemous. That's what I'm trying to tell you, to substitute Beatrice on something that these people would recognize as a Corpus Christi procession. He was saying, just as Jesus is present there, not the same way, but he was also present in Beatrice. He's also present in those things that give you those stabs of joy. But they're pointing back to him. They're signs. You know what I mean? They're arrows. Go this way. They're not, look at me, I'm wonderful. So Beatrice gets out of the carriage. And I gotta tell you a couple of things that Dante does. So everybody's saying together, Benedictus qui venis. Blessed are you who comes. You can finish it in the name of the Lord, right? Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. They're greeting her in almost the way they greeted Jesus. All saying together, Benedictus qui venis, then scattering flowers about on every side. Manibus odate lilia planis. Oh, give lilies with full hands. It's not from the Bible. It's not from Scripture. It's not from church. It's from the Aeneid. I love this. Because Virgil has followed him all this way. Some of you remember Aeneas goes to the underworld and he sees his dad there in Chryses. And he says, look, Aeneas, here are all the Roman, people that will be born from your line in future. And one of them is Marcellus. And they say, oh, give lilies with full hands. Because Marcellus was this awesome guy, and then he died really young and disappointed everybody. And then, to top it off, she gets out of the cart. And here's what he says. My soul, such years had passed since last it saw that lady, and stood trembling in her presence, stupefied by the power of holy awe. Now, by some power that shone from her above, the reach and witness of my mortal eyes felt the full mastery of enduring love. The instant I was smitten by the force, which had already once transfixed my soul, before my boyhood years had run their course, I turned left with the same assured belief that makes a child run to its mother's arms when it is frightened or has come to grief. To say to Virgil, there is not within me one drop of blood unstirred. I recognize the tokens of the ancient flame. Agnosco veteris vestigia flammae. It's from the Aeneid. Dido says in Carthage, the crazy lady in Carthage that kills herself. Those of you who remember the story. She tells her sister when Aeneas lands in Carthage. She has a husband that he's dead, but she's sworn allegiance to him. She says, I recognize the footprints of the old flame. I know what it feels like to fall in love. I'm falling for this guy. She tells her sister. That's what he turns to say to Virgil. I recognize the tokens of the ancient flame. Turns to him to quote Virgil, but he had taken his light from us. He had gone. Virgil had gone. Virgil, the gentle father to whom I gave my soul for its salvation. Not all that sight of Eden lost to view by our first mother could hold back the tears that stained my cheeks so lightly washed with dew. Dante, do not weep yet. The only time he names himself in the poem. Dante, do not weep yet, though Virgil goes. Do not weep yet, for soon another wound shall make you weep far hotter tears than these. Well, that's not very encouraging. As an admiral takes his place at stern or bow to observe the handling of his other ships and spur all hands to do their best, so now, on the chariot's left side, I saw appear when I turned at the sound of my own name, which necessarily is recorded here, that lady who had been half veiled from view by the flowers of the angel revels. Now her eyes fixed me across the stream, piercing me through. Beatrice has an earful for Dante. This is no, oh, I missed you. No, she's going to chew him out. She is going to chew him out. What? You just ditched the memory of me? You chased after other things? Remember what she is, though. She's love for God. But go ahead.
Didn't she like not actually date him?
Yes, this is true. But in the story, first of all, he swore like undying devotion for Beatrice, literally. But figuratively, he's supposed to keep his eyes fixed on God, the love of God for him. She says, the instant I'd come upon the sill of my second age and crossed and changed my life, he left me and let others shape his will. When I rose from the flesh into the spirit, to greater beauty and to greater virtue, he found less pleasure in me and less merit. When I died, you would think that in my glorified state, knowing I was, he'd be even more devoted to me because I'm pure now. I'm in a better place. No, he found me less pleasant. He turned his steps aside from the true way, pursuing the false images of good that promise what they never wholly pay. Dante, God stabbed you with joy through my eyes. He reached out to you, and you just forgot about it. You just forgot about it. You started dabbling in philosophy and all sorts of other pursuits, and you just forgot. By the way, what I just read earlier, I turned at the sound of my own name, which necessarily is recorded here. That lady who had been half veiled from view by the flowers of the angel revels. That lady. That line is line 64 of Canto 64. That lady. The center of this, Beatrice. 64, 64. I told you numbers are really important to Dante. He put it there for a reason. He put that lady. This is what this is all about. That lady came to me and showed me God. Then I ignored that lady. And that lady is God for all of us. That lady is God calling to us. Yeah, she just goes on and on and on and tells him, oh, let me go to the next canto. You there, who stand upon the other side of the river, turning to me now, who had thought the edge of her discourse was sharp, the point. The edge of her discourse, the edge of the sword, I thought that was sharp. Now she turned the point on me. I thought what she was doing before was rough. Now she turned the point of the sword on me. She cried without pause in her flow of eloquence, speak up, speak up. Is it true? To such a charge, your own confession must give evidence. I stood as if my spirit had turned numb. The organ of my speech moved, but my voice died in my throat before word could come. Briefly she paused, then cried impatiently, "What are you thinking? Speak up! For the waters have yet to purge sin from your memory. You haven't drunk from Lethe yet. You remember everything." Confusion joined to terror forced a broken yes from my throat, so weak that only one who read my lips would know that I had spoken. As an arbalist will snap when the string and bow are drawn too tight by the bowman, like a crossbow, and the bolt will strike the target at diminished blow, so did I shatter, strengthless and unstrung under her charge, pouring out floods of tears, while my voice died in me on the way to my tongue. Skipping down, she says, let me say what he said. In tears I said, the things of the world's day, false pleasures and enticements, turn my steps as soon as he would cease to light my way. And she, had you been silent or denied what you confess, your guilt would still be known to him from whom no guilt may hope to hide. But here before our court, when souls upbraid themselves for their own guilt and true remorse, the grindstone is turned back against the blade. In any case, that you may know your crime truly and with true shame, and be stronger against the siren song another time. There's that siren again. Control your tears and listen with your soul. She says, if you confess, you've done the wrong thing. Good. Don't you dare stand here in the earthly paradise and pretend it was all okay. His reward is he gets dunked, right, in the river. Interestingly, it says he's taken to the river, and then they tell him to look deep in Beatrice's eyes. Her eyes are emerald. They're green. So either their hope or their faith, unclear, but I like hope better there. She's the hope of not returning to that way that he was before. 1,000, I want to talk, got a little time. Okay. 1,000 burning passions, everyone hotter than any flame, held my eyes fixed to the lucent eyes she held fixed on the griffin. I feel like this is important. He's looking in Beatrice's eyes, her green eyes. What is she looking at? The griffin. I'm looking into the eyes that are looking at the griffin. She's not looking at him. She keeps her gaze fixed on Christ, right? Remember, she reflects. She reflects. And in her eyes, like sunlight in a glass, the twofold creature shone from the deep reflection in her eyes, now in the one, now in the other nature. I see the eagle, I see the lion. I see the eagle, I see the lion. And while my soul in wonder, stanza before. Judge, reader, if I found it passing strange to see the thing unaltered in itself, yet in its image working change on change. The griffin's sitting there and he looks like a griffin. But in her eyes, now he's eagle, now he's a lion, now he's eagle, now he's a lion. Now he's human, now he's divine, now he's human. Have you ever thought about that it's hard to think of Jesus as both at the same time in our minds? I mean, it is for me. Like sometimes I think about, what does this mean that Jesus is a man? Do you know what I mean? That he suffered and was tempted every way that I am, that he took my full humanity into him. And then I think on that. And I think, what does it mean that God is the pre-existent, Son begotten before all worlds? But it's really hard for me to do both at the same time, like go both directions. I mean, I know it in my head. I can say the words. But when I start thinking about it, I always kind of go one direction or the other. And so he's looking in her eyes. It's like, now it's one, now it's the other. But he's just there. He's just the same. She reflects Christ. She's not the object. All right, the things go downhill with the pageant, don't they? The cart gets left there, tied to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And by the way, it says, I don't know if you read the note on this. I want to point this out. Then he drew up before the widowed mast the chariot's pole. So dragging the chariot to the tree, by the pole, the thing you hitch to something,
Yeah.
that you would carry it by. And what came from the tree, he gave it back and tied the two stems fast. All right, well, we might just say, well, it's wooden and the tree is wooden, right? Done. Does anybody know, if you read the note, it's fine to say it, but does anybody know what in the Middle Ages they like to think where the cross came from? The wood of the cross. It was fancifully thought to come from a special place. I don't know how they explain that it came from there. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The thing that ruined us was the thing that saved us. The instrument of it, anyway. What came from the tree, he gave it back. He hitched the chariot pole. Chariot pole is the cross. If the griffin pulls the chariot and the what do you call it, the pole, it's got a name, the thing that sticks out from the front,
Is it like
The-
hitch or something?
the hitch, you know what I mean. If that's the cross. And the carriage is holding the host or whatever, like the representation of God. What is the carriage? The church. Christ leads it through the cross and it carries his representation. And then the chariot gets left there and a whole boatload of bad stuff happens to it. Do you remember this part? Eagles attack it, foxes attack it, some monster attacks it, a giant attacks it. It's a mess. Are you guys familiar with, well, let's read this part. Okay, we have the dragon. Okay. So changed, the holy ark began to sprout heads from its various parts, 3 from the pole, 1 from each corner. 7 in all grew out. 3 were horned like oxen, but the 4 were each armed with a single evil horn. No one had seen the monsters like before. Secure as a great fortress on a crag, an ungirt harlot rode the beast, her eyes darting with avarice. It turns into a many-headed, multi-horned monster. Does this sound familiar to anybody with like 7 heads and 10 horns and harlots riding on a beast? Where do we see this?
Revelation.
In Revelation. In Revelation. It's the beast of Revelation. Dante is kind of telling us the history of the church. He says, first of all, the bird of Jove, the eagle, attacked it. Did the Roman Empire attack the church at first? Oh, so yes. Next, a fox climbed up and started messing with it. Yeah, foxes are always what in stories? What is their characteristic? What are they? They're sly, they're shifty, they're tricky, they're heretics. We have, then a bird descends and showers it with gold. This is Constantine giving the papal lands, which he didn't actually do. I think does everybody know, the donation of Constantine was a forgery. They discovered this in the 1500s. There was a document that said that the Pope had cured Pope Sylvester, Pope Sylvester had cured Constantine of leprosy or some disease. And so he left Italy to Sylvester and gave him all the lands around Rome for a possession for the church. And this was completely made up. They proved it was a forgery, but not until it had been around for hundreds of years, as an excuse for the papacy to own certain parts of Italy. But Dante didn't know it was a forgery. So he's just kind of lamenting. He says that was bad news. The church never should have gotten rich. That's bad news. Yeah, and then a dragon splits a fissure underneath it. Obviously, it's some sort of schism. It might be the East-West schism. It might be the Muslims. Unclear, maybe both. Yeah, and then we get to that Church of Revelation that is just off the rails. And this is not very encouraging. This is not very encouraging. But it's so nice that the next canto begins, and a few stanzas in. Beatrice, when she heard them mourn such loss, sighed with a grief so deep that even Mary could not have changed more at the foot of the cross. But when the other virgins in their choir fell still for her reply, remember, she is the representation of God. She is God speaking through his creation. You've just seen the church ruined. She rose erect in holy zeal and said, as if afire, Modicum et non videbitis me, et iterum, dearly beloved sisters, modicum et vos videbitis me. A little while and you will not see me. And then again, a little while and you will see me. Jesus, right? Before he dies, that's what he says to the disciples. A little while you're not going to see me. Then a little while you will see me. It's like, there's resurrection. Beatrice says, don't worry. The church is in bad shape right now. This whole thing has been filled with the church is in bad shape, right? We got popes upside down in the little slots in hell. We got a mess in Italy. And you know what? You're going to hear more about it in paradise. They take a keen interest in paradise and what's going on with the church on earth currently. But she says, you don't see it right now. It's not in good shape, but a little while and you will see it. It will be back. Nothing's conquering the church. So he's drunk from Lethe. He's drunk from Unui. He's restored. All right. He knows his sin, but he knows it in a detached way, and he's not bound to it anymore. And she says to him, now draw near, that you may, if I wish to speak to you as we move on, be better placed to hear. When I was, as I should be, at her side, she said, do you want to question me as we move on? When I was, as I should be. I should always have been by God's side. I should always been following him and following up on the hints that he gave me of his love for me, but I didn't. But I am now. I'm following her. And what is the last word of the purgatory? Stars. Again, just like Inferno. Okay, I want you to read Paradise. I don't know what I told you to read. 12 through 12, 1 through 12. But before we leave, we got like 8 minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about the medieval solar system. And you may know this. This might be old stuff for some of you, but it might not for a few. So you guys all realize, I think, that Ptolemy, the Ptolemaic solar system, the Earth was in the middle, right? And so we have all of these, I'm going to draw all of them, okay? We have these concentric rings, but they're spheres, all right? They're balls inside of balls. So the Earth is a ball, and then there's a ball around the Earth. It's not just the path of the moon. Do you understand? It's an actual sphere that you can see through. And so, you have the moon. And then I don't remember what order they come in. I think it's like Mercury, and you'll meet them in order. And what's going to happen to Dante is this. He's on Earth. He's at the top of that mountain. And he's now going to move through the successive spheres until he gets to the biggest one on the outside. This one's called the primum mobile. It's from Aristotle, and literally it means first mover. So here's the idea. The primum mobile spins. It's a huge sphere. It's a huge sphere. Everything else, like the whole universe, is inside the sphere. And it's just spinning, right? And I think I've mentioned this to you guys before, that you ever have those kids' toys and it's got like little things inside and you spin it across the ground and then stuff inside it moves because it rolls? Or I'm trying to think of another toy or something that does that, but you get the idea. So if the outside thing spins, it makes the stuff inside start to spin. That's the idea here. This whirls and it makes this spin. And this spins, then it makes this spin. This spin and it goes on and on and on until it makes the Earth rotate. And this one goes really, really fast because it's so big. Do you know what I mean? It covers a lot of ground really fast. My husband told me, you know those windmills? You know the huge windmills? He told me, I have trouble believing it. The speed with which the outer tip of one of those big blades goes. I mean, the whole thing doesn't look like it's going very fast. But if you put like a speedometer on the outside, it's some crazy speed that they're moving through space. But it just because of the size, it doesn't look very fast. So if you saw the Prima Mobile, it might not look incredibly fast, but it's going super fast because it goes through such a wide area. Each of these spheres has one of the planetary bodies. He does not know about Pluto and Uranus, Neptune. No, just up to Jupiter, right? They just had no telescopes yet. They couldn't. Saturn's in there. They do know Saturn because that's the last one he missed. One of these also has the stars on it. The idea being that the stars are all at a fixed distance from us. Some of them are just brighter than others, and that's why they look different from our side. So he's going to go and he's going to meet people on each sphere. They're all in heaven, but they're in a place that reflects their character or something they were marked for. For example, the sphere of Mars, as you might expect, had warriors, because Mars is the god of war. The sphere of the moon has people who were changeable, because the moon changes all the time, right? People, specifically people who made religious vows and broke them. Go ahead. I have a feeling I know, but go ahead. It isn't, but in most cases they were forced to. And Dante asked, well, how are they being held responsible? And they're forced. But here's the hurdle to reading the Paradise. And Dante's going to try to take the hurdle away because he's going to talk about over and over again. It seems like to Dante that the people in the moon sphere are less blessed than the people in the Mercury sphere. And the people in the Mercury sphere are less blessed than these people. And it's like, well, why don't you all get to be in the same place? And aren't you sad? Wouldn't you like to be in a higher place? And she's like, no, you don't understand. You don't get it, do you? I am in the perfect place for me. This is how much I can handle. In heaven, I mean Dante's heaven, okay? I don't know much about heaven, all right? In Dante's heaven, although this seems reasonable, everybody is as chock full of God as they can handle. But we aren't all created equal. Unlike the Declaration of Independence, we are hopefully created equal under the law. We are not created equal as human beings. Some people are smarter than others. Some people just have a greater capacity. This always blows me away that not everybody could see Jesus after the resurrection. I mean, some of them didn't recognize him for a while. Now, why did everybody not just look at Jesus? I'm not sure everybody could see him. Do you know what I mean? You got to have a certain capacity. The littler kids were just reading Lord of the Rings right now, and in Lothlorien, if this doesn't mean anything to you, just ignore it, but for some of you it does. In Lothlorien, Galadriel shows that she has Ninya, one of the 3 elven rings, and Frodo sees it. Sam doesn't see it. He says later, yeah, I wondered, I saw a star shining from between her fingers. I didn't know what you were talking about. Sam can't handle the vision of Ninya. He's not capable. So she says, here's the deal. Everybody in heaven has as very much of God as their nature that they were created to have can hold. So we are all completely and utterly perfectly happy because this is our place. But heaven is not a place. It's not a democracy. It's not equality. There's hierarchy in heaven. There's hierarchy in angels. We know this from the Bible. And I don't know, the disciples were asking about who could sit at his right hand and his left, But it's not hierarchy like it is on earth. Oh, I'm so jealous, as I wish I had. No. The lady he's going to meet on the sphere of the moon says, you don't understand. I have as much of God as I was ever created capable of holding. This is who I'm made to be. And I'm so happy. You know what? It's like Paul said, if we're all ahead, Where's the foot? If we're all the right arm, where's the kidneys? That is not a quote from scripture. So made that up. But you know what I mean. Addison, go ahead.
But the disciples were corrected for assuming
They were corrected for presuming that they were fighting for the places of honor. I don't think they were corrected that there was a hierarchy. I think they were said, that's not what you're supposed to be about. You don't seek the places of honor, you serve. So, anyway, I'm not saying, again, I've told you this over and over. Dante's not saying this is so what paradise is like. This is a poem. But it's something interesting to think about. However, I'm going to keep this for the end. There's a twist at the end. It's like a movie with a twist. There's a twist at the end, and you find out that everything is not as it seems. Everything is not going to be as it seems. So patiently listen as the people explain. I am in the place that's suitable for me, because 3 weeks from now, the twist comes, okay? So read 1 through 12, give a shot at the imitation, the super long imitation with the conversation. Read mine if it inspires you, and I will see you next week. And my computer.